Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Arapahoe County and Tri-County Health Department Business Roundtable. Our goal today is to provide a platform for the business community to get COVID-19 related updates from the Tri-County Health Department. We also want to give you the opportunity to ask questions you may have about opening and operating your business as safely as possible during the Safer at Home public health order. The Tri-County Health Department will also introduce you to their new Business Reopening Task Force and provide you contact information to reach out for help if you need it. We are eager to hear from you today. Hearing your questions and understanding your challenges will help us better provide the support you need during this challenging time. My name is Chris, and I'll be your moderator today. If you've never joined us for a telephone town hall before, the process is simple. If you'd like to ask a question, simply dial *3 on your phone, and one of our operators will come online and take your question. If you've joined us through our website, you can also type your question in the box below the player. We'll try to get to as many questions today as possible. We'd also like you to know that this Business Roundtable is brought to you by the Arapahoe Douglas Workforce Development Board and is funded through the Arapahoe County CARES program. That program is distributing more than $114 million in funding from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. The county is committed to helping businesses as much as possible during this crisis. This week, the state announced an extension of the Safer at Home public health order, and here to help us understand what that means for our business community is Melissa Sager with the Tri-County Health Department. Melissa is the Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs Manager and has appeared on many of our town halls to help us better understand what these policy directives mean for us. Good afternoon, Melissa.
Thanks so much, Chris. I'm really excited to be here to talk directly to the business community. You mentioned our Business Reopening Task Force, who's joining me silently behind the scenes. We put together this Business Reopening Task Force to directly work with businesses to provide technical assistance as we move toward greater reopening. It's a fantastic team, and I'd encourage you to reach out. The best way to reach that team is by email, and I'll say this again later, but the email address is covidbusinessrecovery@tchd.org. That's covidbusinessrecovery@tchd.org. And we are moving into greater reopening. Most recently, the governor released the new Safer at Home and in the Vast Great Outdoors. This executive order provided a few additional provisions, including some increased opening. We received that on Monday, along with some draft guidance from the state health department. They're actually seeking feedback on that. They were seeking feedback on that draft guidance until noon today, where they asked stakeholders to provide feedback, and they'll be incorporating that into official guidance that will be issued either tomorrow or Friday. Those guidances included outdoor recreation, which included pools and team sports, places of worship, and outdoor recreation businesses. We did receive the updated public health order on Tuesday that provided greater detail into how we'll be operating under this new Safer at Home and in the Vast Great Outdoors. But some of the things that are opened under this new order that were previously closed are playgrounds, team sports, pools. Places of worship will be permitted to increase their capacity to 50 people maximum. And then there's a few other 50% or 50 for pools. Team sports can happen in groups of 10 indoors or 25 outdoors. So there's a lot of information contained in these two documents, as I'm sure you all know. And so I'm really excited to hear your questions about this, both to try and answer them today, but also to inform our process as we go back, have these conversations with the state. And so it's great to hear from you, and I'm excited for your question.
Great, thank you, Melissa. As a reminder to all our callers, if you have a question, you can dial *3 on your phone to be connected to one of our operators. It looks like we have a lot of shy callers today because we don't have that many people calling in with questions, but we do have plenty of online questions that are coming in. And let's go ahead and start with that. Our first question is, What are the current capacity guidelines for businesses? We are a nonprofit with 40 employees and 100 plus volunteers looking for guidance on how we can best operate. Thank you. Melissa?
It's a really great question, and one that depends on what type of business you're engaged in. In the traditional office setting, you're permitted to operate at 50% capacity. We encourage you to have all of the folks that can work from home continue to work from home. We also ask you to accommodate vulnerable individuals and encourage those folks to continue working from home or to provide alternative work situations that increases their protection from the virus. In other settings, if it's depending on the activities that you're engaged in, if it's a nonprofit volunteer and you're collecting items, donations, things like that, it would look a little different. But it does look like that 50% capacity. You want to avoid any gatherings in a single room that exceed 10 people. And you want to do as much as you can outdoors if folks have to do things in person. If you'd like additional information, there's a lot of guidance on the State Health Department's website, as well as Tri-County's business page under our COVID updates. And I'd encourage you to take a look through. But there are a lot of things that you can do so long as you have proper protections in place.
Awesome. Thank you. Our next question is also from online. It's from Diane. And it says, my construction employees work outside. Our general contractor is requiring them to wear masks. The masks are hot, and we have treated 2 employees for heat stroke and 1 for breathing difficulties. In what outside work situations are masks required?
Those masks are required whenever close contact cannot be avoided, either with the general public or your coworkers, and that would include other contractors. And so oftentimes if there's movement occurring in this space, if you're doing some work in an office space and those employees are going to be walking by, if you as a construction worker have to come into closer contact with your coworkers as you're engaging in this activity, you're going to need to wear that mask. The masks are required only when safe to do so. And so if folks are having medical issues with that mask, it would not be required. But if you can connect with me offline after this call, I'd really like to talk about your specific situation and what you're encountering and see if we can remedy that issue and provide additional information.
Thank you for that. We've got another online question related to gyms. Can you give guidance on how many people are allowed in gyms and in separate rooms in gyms?
Absolutely. Gyms are limited to those groups of 10. This is by room, and so a gym can have multiple rooms of 10 people, so long as no more than 10 are entering. This does not have to include a personal trainer any longer. And so if you're operating a gym and you would like to allow 10 people into a room to exercise in that room, it's also okay in indoor swimming pools. And so it's come up a lot for folks who want to go swim laps. That's permissible, no trainer needed, but limited to 10 people in that pool. But you can have those multiple groups, and so it can be 10 people in the indoor pool, 10 folks on a rower machine or bikes. But we want to see those folks separated and not having contact, not freely moving about the gym to different sections without any control there. And one of the big pieces of that is shared equipment and shared surfaces. And what we're looking for is sanitation after every group use. And so it looks a lot different than an open gym that we're used to. It may look like you have a block of time in a certain area of the gym. You have an appointment for that time. You come, you go to that space, and you leave right after, instead of, starting on the rower and heading to the pool and then, hitting the showers before you head out. Also, the locker rooms in gyms are still going to be closed. The bathrooms and showers will be open, but just trying to avoid that close contact in a locker room, and shared surfaces. But multiple groups of 10, and there is no upper limit to that, so long as you have the space and within those individual rooms, everyone can maintain 6-foot social distancing. But yes, multiple groups of 10 are permitted.
Great, thank you. There's a lot of great information coming out. If you're just joining us and you'd like to ask a question, as a reminder, you can dial *3 on your phone, and you'll be connected to an operator who can take your question and get you into the queue. We are going to go to a live caller. We have Alan, who has a business in Colorado, but is actually calling from Oklahoma, and he has a question regarding a fundraising event. Alan, go ahead, you're live.
Yeah, thank you. I have some business interest there in Denver and some of the surrounding cities, and my question is I'm trying to make some sense out of some of what seems to be kind of arbitrary kind of thinking on groups of people, numbers of people, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's entertainment. And here's the scenario. I thought maybe I could just throw this out there and we could get some guidance, which is, if somebody's coming into a billiard hall or a den and they're playing pool, it seemed on the surface that person would be, there's no contact obviously, but one person's playing, one person is sitting down. The restrictions or the guidelines that looks like that would be in place for somebody not being around somebody seem to be intact there. And then we don't play outside, so the 25 doesn't matter, but we were planning on putting together in the next couple of weeks, and this all might be moot pretty soon, but we wanted to do a fundraiser and bring maybe 4 or 5 of the people there, and then the billiard community, which may be upwards of, maybe 10,000 people, to come out and do a fundraising live streamed event across the country to our network of players to raise some money for the people and the employees that are there in all of these different pool halls where we have leagues and different operations running. So, we want to come in and make sure that we get some support and some help for some people, but we also want to find out, how do we manage or run something like that? What are we looking at for the pool room owners for fully opening? And, they can't keep doing this much longer, I guess. That's really it.
Yeah, it's a complex question. And if I'm understanding correctly, the goal would be to have a live streamed event with a very limited number of people in person, but live streamed to raise funds. Is that correct? So for those type of events where those are the type of things that we're encouraging, to have, a group of 10 or less, and live stream them so that lots of folks can be involved, but limiting it to that 10 or less folks in one room. The sharing of pool tables, and it's a little complex because pool tables are prohibited, and the idea behind it is that pool tables encourage folks to linger and stay longer, to move about. So in a restaurant, you're seated in your seat, and in a pool table, you're moving about a room with maybe multiple pool tables. And there's a lot of shared equipment, including the pool balls themselves, but also pool sticks and the like. And so there's a concerns about that in the general sense, and they're not permitted to be open at this time. But for an event like this, please do reach out offline, because with a small group closed to the public for a streamed event, we'd be happy to chat through how to do that safely. More generally, we are moving toward this gradual reopening, and we are looking at things like these unique settings, like a pool hall that would have lots of pool tables. Maybe they also serve alcohol, and maybe they serve food, or maybe they don't. And so we're really looking at ways for unique business settings like this to operate, both under restaurant guidelines that are available, but also as we move toward increased opening, how do we let these folks operate these unique kind of settings? And it comes up a lot in all different kind of ways, from your wine and paint night to Top Golf. These are unique spaces. They don't fit nicely into a certain category. For the limitations on the number of people, currently set at 50 for restaurants, we are advocating to the state and having conversations with them regularly about what it looks like to not have a strict number for businesses, but rather base it on capacity and square footage. The difficulty with that is that our businesses are so unique that putting a flat percentage, while it may work for a lot of businesses, it may not work for some. And so it gets a little difficult to put that into words and guide our businesses on that. And just using an example, Park Meadows Mall, they received a variance to operate, but the state said that's fine, but not 50% capacity because that establishment is very large. You can only do 175 people. And so that is an enormous space that the state was still saying we need to keep it smaller. And I'll just add that another reasoning for that is contact tracing. It's very difficult to keep track of large numbers of folks, especially in settings where they could have close contact and transmission is riskier. We need to be able to reach out to those people. And so for larger numbers, it makes it more challenging. Keeping it to 50 in a restaurant setting makes it doable for the health department to reach out to those folks and contain the virus. So lots of information there, but I appreciate the question.
Great, thank you for that. This next question comes from Facebook, and it's from Stacy. And it says, will the health department release guidelines for public and or outdoor HOA pools following the guidance from CDPHE tomorrow? If so, do you anticipate that it will follow the CDPHE guidance or extend beyond? And that's a common question we're seeing with a lot of our Facebook questions about pools.
Yes, and this was guidance that we have been waiting for a very long time. CDPHE sent draft guidance out one Tuesday, or on Monday, sorry, and they did cover pools specifically. Tri-County will not be issuing orders surrounding pools. We'll follow the state's order and guidelines on that. We have provided feedback to the state on those guidelines. One major issue that's coming up that was unanticipated is unattended pools. So a lot of pools where you just swipe your card to go in and there's no lifeguard on duty, it's unattended. The current guidance requires hourly cleaning of both the restrooms and high-touch surfaces like the railings on the stairs and ladders. And so we're talking to the state about whether those pools can open that aren't attended, because there's a lot of concerns there about, who's making sure social distancing is adhered to, who's cleaning those surfaces that are very risky. This is already a risky setting and strictly regulated. And so we do have concerns there. But is there a way that we can engage the folks who come to swim to make cleaning products available, put Lysol wipes or Clorox wipes at each high-touch surface with instructions that guests use them prior to using the facilities? So those conversations are happening, and the message has been given to the state. We do not know exactly what the final guidance will look like, but do check back on the state's website tomorrow and or reach out to us here at Tri-County. We'd be happy to chat through what the ultimate requirements are under that.
Great, thank you. Popular question. Keeping in the same theme with recreation, let's go to Bill from South Suburban, who has a question about ice rinks. Bill, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for hosting this. And I had a question about ice rinks. Obviously, we're opening up outdoor sports, and our restaurants can operate at minimum capacity. Currently, we can do camps with our groups of 10. Has there been consideration with the ice rinks, knowing that the occupancy of an ice rink is 1,000 people and it has a 33-foot ceiling? It's a much larger room. So at 10, we really can't perform any of our youth sports, but we believe it's because everyone has their own equipment that it's probably a safer sport than the other sports that are sharing equipment. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's no problem. And ice rinks have come up. The limit is currently 10 indoors, both for youth camps as well as sports and recreation in general, limited to that 10. Tri-County does have guidance regarding personal recreation, and we'd be happy to discuss how we can create two separate settings within an ice rink, maybe to allow two groups of 10 to engage in that activity. Of course, with the limitation with, games would be difficult in that way. And so it's a tough spot. The indoor spaces are just a bit riskier without outdoor open ventilation, increased space. But we do understand that there are a lot of facilities that are quite large and could realistically host multiple groups of 10 safely with social distancing. We're communicating with the state about that very generally for businesses, just acknowledging that our business community is so diverse. And there are so many different facilities and ways to keep folks safe. For now, that restriction is on 10, but we are looking into what it can look like based more on square footage than a set limit. And so do check back both with this update tomorrow that we expect from the state, but generally because updates are coming fairly frequently and that could change.
Great, thank you, Melissa. We've got another Facebook question from Dawn, and it says, if a beauty salon has excess space, when will we be allowed to add one more stylist and one more client?
So hopefully this is some good news that you don't know yet, but the state, starting tomorrow, the 4th, personal care services are permitted to have 50% occupancy at a maximum of 50 people. And so before that number was 10, that meant 5 stylists and 5 people getting their hair done. Now that number is 50, and it depends on your space and how large your space is. You should still be operating at 50% capacity, and that looks like every other chair, but up to 50 people now. And this is a good example of the gradual changes that the state has been making and the kind of things that you need to look out for. And it's not ideal, but you just have to keep checking back to see if anything has changed. And in this case, the state did raise that to 50% or 50 people.
Great. We've got some wonderful questions coming through online. As a reminder, if you'd like to join live on the air, we can certainly do that for you. Just dial *3 on your phone, and one of our operators can get you lined up. Right now, we have another Facebook question. Is the 50% capacity relative to the size of our staff or our building capacity? Also, is that at any one time or per day?
Chris, I'm sorry, you cut out just at the very beginning. I heard is that at one time or in one day, but missed the beginning.
I apologize for that. Let's try this again. We have a Facebook question from L. Edwards. It says, is the 50% capacity relative to the size of our staff or our building capacity? Is that at any one time or per day?
It is based on your building capacity, but really what we're looking for is, in general, operating your business at 50% capacity. And so it's not, ideally you would have 50% of your staff operating at 50%, but it's based on building capacity and the number of folks that you can have in your building space. And so it's by fire code, you should have a number and you should be operating at a maximum number of people, 50% of that fire code number. It is at one time, not by day, but I am curious what your business is with folks rotating throughout the day. But it is at one time, and depending on your business, you'll have other restrictions or requirements to ensure safety, contact tracing, and excluding folks who are sick, and that'll look different depending on what your business is.
Great, thank you. We have another online question. This is very popular on our social media channels. Are event centers able to hold wedding receptions?
So under the current Safer at Home and in the vast great outdoors, had to double check my notes for that, Event centers are not permitted, and so these general event spaces, they're permitted but limited to 10 people, and that's something I'll note that was changed in this order. If your business or activity is not mentioned in the order here, you are permitted to engage in that activity or business so long as you do not have more than 10 people gathered, and those folks can maintain social distancing at all times in those settings.
Wonderful. We have a Facebook question from Steve. Steve asks, masks are an obvious source of cross-contamination. Much touching of the front of them, removing, moving, and setting them down. When can we eliminate their requirement in restaurants?
So more and more information becomes available, for these cloth face coverings, their effectiveness. But what we have seen is that a cloth face covering can help stop the spread of COVID-19. We're looking for them to be used in spaces where 6-foot distancing is difficult to maintain. And in a restaurant specifically, you have a significant number of folks gathered into one location with people walking through to the restroom, coming, going, to step outside. And so it's difficult to control that. You are permitted to remove your mask when you're seated at your table, but when you get there and when you leave, you need to have that, or when you're going to the restroom, again, because that 6-foot distancing is very difficult to maintain. We do anticipate mask wearing being a big part of reopening, just as a tool that we can use to decrease the spread, which ultimately helps us to increase our opening. And so we do ask that you wear that mask when you're out and about in public, when you're out in stores, grocery stores, whenever it's difficult to maintain 6-foot distancing or you'll be moving around. We really encourage the use of those masks. And then when you're not, you can take those off.
Awesome. Thank you. This is another popular question we see on our social media. If my employer is not following the requirements, what should I do as an employee?
That's a fantastic question, and we'd encourage you to reach out to our call center. So I mentioned our Business Reopening Task Force that's available to provide technical assistance to our businesses and employees should you have questions about operations or what the requirements are. But if a business is violating the order or not adhering to the requirements, we'd encourage you to call our call center. The number for that call center is 303-220-9200. And we have folks working the call center from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. We also have folks over the weekend and in the evening should something come up, but that'll go to voicemail and someone will get back to you. But we will reach out to the business and provide information on what the requirements of the order are, as well as if they're having difficulty meeting the requirements, connecting them to resources and information that help them do that. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to provide more information to you and your employer.
Great, thank you. If you're just joining us, we have been talking with Melissa Sager from the Tri-County Health Department, answering your questions about COVID-19 and business. And we'd like to go to a live caller. We have David who would like to expand your talk about event centers and event capacity. David, go ahead, you're live.
Hi, Melissa. This is David. I own an event center, and the event center is around 3,800 square feet. It has 3 separate rooms. I have a tavern license, and I serve food, and I have all kinds of events, not just wedding receptions, but celebrations of life, birthday parties, baby showers. So the interior capacity by fire code supports roughly 130 people in the 3 different rooms. The exterior and the patios support another 110 people by fire code. And then I have 3,000 square foot of grass that supports another, I don't know how many, probably 200. So I'm really concerned that there's an overreach on event spaces as compared to restaurants, in that I, like a restaurant or food service place, have a tavern license with food service license, and I can support the social distancing requirements as laid out by the government today. So are you saying that event centers are limited to 10 people? Is that what I heard?
Yes. So if you're operating as a restaurant, you can operate with 50 people, but it is a 50-person maximum. The outdoor space can be used, but again, we'd be looking for you to operate like a restaurant, and so that looks like reservation only, assigned seating, not moving about to switch rooms, not moving from inside to outside and back. Also, the other distinction with restaurants is that folks are there for a very limited amount of time, as opposed to an event center where events can last hours or even an entire day, which increases your risk of exposure. And so, but I will say that event centers are a topic of regular conversation. We do understand that event centers are seeing restaurants, places of worship, all types of places open, but event centers pose their own risks. In a restaurant, we know what a restaurant looks like. We know what you're there for. We've removed all the extra stuff, shared surfaces, games, things like that. And so the idea is that you come for a limited amount of time, you have your meal, and then you leave. And so event centers are very different than that. If it's operated like a restaurant with assigned seating and appointment only and things like that, you can engage in that activity. But the event piece of it does change things. And then, there's a lot of additional stuff in that space too. Are you playing music? Do you have a dance floor? Do you have tables set up or people moving about? The inherent nature of an event space is that oftentimes you're moving, whether it be from one conference session to another or to head to lunch or whatnot. And so it's a little trickier in this space, but we are looking at what it looks like to have these event centers open for a variety of reasons and what guidelines we can put in place that allow event centers to continue operating, but what may look like very different from what they're used to. And it's just a unique space that changes every day depending on what the space is being used for. And so those conversations are happening. I'd encourage you to reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear about what you're thinking and just keep an eye out for updates. But for now, it's limited to 10 for those events. And then if it's considered a restaurant, if you're operating like a restaurant, then you can operate under those restaurant guidelines so long as you're adhering to them strictly.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's go to another online question. My employer requires us to collect health information on our employees, record it in writing, and turn it into them. I don't think this is legal for my non-healthcare business to record it or hand it over to a third party. Where's my employees' personal health information and privacy? Can you give some guidance?
Absolutely, and I don't want to spend too much time on it just because I'm not the subject matter expert in this. But we have had this question come up, and businesses are permitted to screen their employees. That information that you're collecting, have you experienced any symptoms? Have you had contact with any symptoms, with anyone experiencing symptoms? Even have you traveled outside of the state? Your employer can require that information to be collected. And what it does is it decreases the risk of spread in the place of employment. Depending on your setting, that information will look, that collection of information will look different. For instance, in a personal care setting, like a hair salon, where very close contact is unavoidable, we ask that those businesses both take their employee health information, that health screening, as well as their customers. And we maintain those records for contact tracing. So it will really depend on your individual situation and what the business is. But if you have additional questions, I'll mention that the Business Reopening Task Force email again really quickly. It's COVID Business Recovery, all one word, at tchd.org. We'd be happy to take more information about your individual situation and provide guidance to both you and your employer.
Great, thank you. We've got another Facebook question that seems to be a very popular place for us today. I am part of a youth football board. We are looking for guidance on football and football practices, since 2 teams would be more than 2. I think there's more to that comment, more than 20. Can you give some general guidance on what they can expect?
Yes, football is going to be a bit tough. New guidance did come out, that draft guidance that I referenced earlier from the State Health Department, that we expect finalized tomorrow. What that allows for is 10 kiddos inside, 25 outside. That's going to be per the field that you're on. Groups have to stay separate at all times. Football is challenging because the teams are quite large. Also challenging is that it's high contact. The state order strongly advises that high contact sports be avoided. And so possibly working with the youth in conditioning or other activities that don't require contact and don't require everyone at one time. So those practices and games may be very difficult for football moving forward. Just this order goes until July 1st. And so pending updates, that activity would be restricted because of the number of folks on a field at one time. But do keep an eye out. And if you're looking for guidance on alternative ways to work with the kids, we'd be happy to connect you with folks who may be able to provide more information.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. As a general reminder, if you'd like to get your call answered live, we'd love to talk with you. And you can dial *3 on your phone to talk to one of our operators and get in the queue. Let's take another online question that has actually shown up a couple of different places, and that is, can you tell me how to apply for a variance from the public health order?
I'm very happy that that came up. The variance process has been very popular, and we have received a lot of questions from the business community about this. So what happened is that the state, in their public health order that Tri-County enforces, they provided a method for our counties to request a variance from the state order that allows the county and the businesses within that county to operate under less restrictive conditions than the statewide order. The process is very lengthy. It requires a lot of data support. It requires a significant amount of planning, including a suppression plan for how to address any spikes in cases. It requires sign-off from all of the hospitals in the jurisdiction. So all of the hospitals in Arapahoe County would have to sign off on that. And then the local public health agency, which is the Tri-County Health Department, us here, reviews that and approves as well. And it can happen in a variety of ways, but our counties are really focusing on industry variances rather than a variance for your one specific business. And so the county is interested in hearing what type of things can be in place to keep folks safe when you're operating your business, and then incorporate it into a plan. It's not finalized. The county has begun that process of seeking a variance and putting together plans to do that. And so please keep in touch, and we're happy to provide more information as that moves forward. But again, this is a county-specific variance. It has to come from the county, and then we're looking at industry-specific variances versus those individual variances.
Great, thank you. I know it's a confusing topic for people. Let's go now to an online question from Dwayne. And Dwayne asks, if you have a facility that serves food and has organized sporting activities such as dart leagues or pool leagues, which guidelines should be followed for capacity? Restaurant capacity of 50 or organized sports activity of 10?
Yes, it's going to be the organized sports activity of 10. We are having conversations with the state about what it looks like for these quasi-businesses to operate. They have these sporting activities, but they also have a retail food license and sell food for on-site consumption. It is a topic for a wide range of businesses. I mentioned Top Golf earlier, but bowling alleys, you mentioned dart leagues, axe throwing, so all of these type of indoor activity businesses, currently limited to that 10-person limit. You can have 10 folks in a room, but that is all. We're exploring what it looks like for these spaces to operate at an increased capacity, but we're worried about movement. They're different from a restaurant. Folks move around. They may go to one table and then another. They stay longer than you would at a restaurant. And so it's a little complex, but we are exploring that. For now, 10 people only.
Wonderful, thank you. Brenda from Facebook is asking, hotels seem to be opening up again. Can business groups meet in large hotel conference rooms that can accommodate 6-foot social distancing, but with groups larger than 10 people?
Currently, they cannot. Those spaces are limited to 10, and it's for all events, these event spaces. Hotels have been permitted to operate as a public accommodation, but those spaces that are larger for conferences and things like that, they're limited to that 10-person limit. Again, lots of complexities to what it looks like to allow events like that more broadly, as they're just vary so greatly as far as what happens at the event, who's there, what the setup is, how to keep folks in their seat and at a distance. So it's a little more challenging, but do keep an eye out for updates on that because it is a topic of conversation.
Thank you. We have a lot of topics of conversation. The next one comes from Dana. Is there any discussion about waiving or suspending the permitting process so fitness studios can hold classes in local parks?
I'm not very familiar with that. I know that our local governments are working very hard to accommodate a variety of businesses in different ways. Restaurants being a good example about how do we adjust the licensing restrictions in that space to allow them to operate more outdoors, serve alcohol outdoors, that type of thing. But it does sound like this may be regulated at the state level. And so I'm jotting this down as far as a license. But in that outdoor space, a class, a personal trainer can have 10 people.
Wonderful. Another question from Facebook from Allie, who joined late and apologizes for that. How about dance fitness centers / studios where we can social distance? Any guidance for her?
Yep, it still falls under that indoor activity. It's limited to groups of 10. You can have multiple groups so long as you have multiple rooms, but it's going to be limited to 10 folks in a dance studio.
Wonderful. Switching gears and going back to bars and restaurants, Melody asks, when will bars without kitchens be able to open?
There's when reaching out to the state about this issue, and we have a lot of unique settings like breweries, brew pubs, taverns that aren't selling that food. One of the big concerns in that space, again, a restaurant, you come to have your meal, you sit at a table, you have a few drinks, and then you leave. In these establishments, it's a bit different. You come there to drink alcohol, which lowers your inhibitions and your ability to keep social distance at all times. And so without, just the inherent setup of an establishment like that, that you come to hang out for an extended period of time, it's a little riskier, and then exclusively selling alcohol, making that risk greater with folks maybe not adhering to social distancing. So what the state has said is that these facilities that are alcohol-only establishments can open as a restaurant so long as they have a food truck or have partnered with a licensed retail food establishment for folks to order food. Again, we'd be looking for these establishments to operate like a restaurant, reservation only, assigned seating. Folks come for a meal and then they head out. But I don't have an exact timeline on what it looks like for bar-only establishments to open without that food component.
Thank you. Speaking of not having a definite answer, that might be the same answer to this next question, which is how long do we anticipate staying in safer at home status?
So it is a unsure question. The current order it goes until July 1st, but there are provisions within that order that allow the state to amend, rescind, and supersede that order, and so we could see something else sooner than July 1st. I will just echo what the governor keeps saying, is that it depends on the data. There's a lot of things that we're looking out for as we gradually reopen. Are we seeing any increase in cases? It's why we're keeping this reopening so controlled. And is any one particular thing that we're allowing increasing the number of cases? The recent protests, are we seeing any spike in cases from those protests or any other increased activity? And that'll really inform next steps. So currently, July 1st is when the order expires. We'll see something at that point, but there's a good chance that we see something earlier. And I did mention earlier, we expect an updated order and that finalized guidance tomorrow or Friday. But those happen will likely happen throughout the month as issues are addressed and amendments are made. So keep an eye out. It's ever changing, but no set date for when this phase ends.
Great, thank you. Switching gears again, back to outside spaces. Can a park's jungle gym open?
Yes, this is another update in the statewide order. Starting tomorrow, playgrounds can open, but they're limited to 10 kiddos at a time. And so in those spaces where that cannot be maintained, and if you're in charge of maintaining that space, we'd ask that you be aware of what what you're able to and what your community is able to adhere to. But yes, those can open 10 kiddos at a time, encouraging social distance, mask wearing when possible. Again, just knowing that kiddos are going to have a hard time keeping that social distance and being aware that mask will help in reducing the spread.
Wonderful. Looking for some more definitions, I think would be a good way to put this, from Chad on Facebook. If your office were to receive information about pool halls operate that satisfied congregation issues, contact tracing solutions, and shared equipment issues, would you grant a variance? I think this is a complicated issue that a couple of people have had. If you could go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, and honestly, I appreciate the question because it is complex, and our businesses are hearing, there is this process by which you can open with less restrictive measures from the order. And I outlined it earlier, and so I won't go through the details, but if you missed that earlier answer, please reach out, and I'm happy, and our business reopening task force would be happy to chat through it with you. But Tri-County Health Department, your local public health agency, does not have the authority to grant that variance. The state is the only one that has the authority to do that, and it has to come from the county. And so I do encourage you to touch base, to send over your plan. It does align with a variety of these indoor athletic facilities, and I mentioned a few, but bowling alleys, axe throwing, And so we're looking into this space, and we know that a lot of businesses are interested. And we do think that this activity can happen safely. It's just a matter of what plans we have in place. And so keep an eye out both for updates to the statewide order, but also on the variance process in Arapahoe County.
Great, thank you. You've answered this next question a little bit. Another caller asking for a little bit more in-depth. Gina asks, can you go into further detail about what is expected inside a fitness club from both a staff and member perspective?
It's a little tough. You can't have more than 10 people in a single room, but outside of that, the limitations on the number of staff and people is not up to an upward limit. And so as long as you're not having more than 10 people in a single space. Again, this looks different than your open gym. If you're using multiple spaces, the person comes to use that space and they leave after. It's not rotating around the gym, and those spaces have to be cleaned after each group of 10. And if any shared equipment is used, it has to be cleaned after every person. And so this is a very controlled environment where staff is monitoring both for sanitation and social distancing and masking requirements. And folks are coming at staggered intervals, again, to come to that space and then to leave after. No hard limits on the number of folks, but there are a number of requirements in that space. One of those being mask wearing by all staff, lots of signage requirements, telling members to wear their mask, wash their hands, hand sanitizer throughout and encouraging use, making announcements every so often to remind people, that type of thing. So do take a look at the requirements on the State Health Department's website regarding personal services, and you'll have more, that'll provide more information on the specifics of what's required to open.
Wonderful, thank you. We have gone through almost all of our questions, a lot of great questions, and just want to remind everyone we're going to be back here again next week. I'll give some more information on that, but wanted to end with a little bit of a trick question, and I think Melissa will understand why. David asks, what does the reopening of schools look like?
Yes, such a trick question, you're right. So we're not sure yet. The department, the Colorado Department of Education is working closely with the State Health Department. Tri-County Health Department is working closely with our superintendents. We've provided a variety of guidelines to our superintendents, to our individual schools, both about individual activities, but more importantly, or most importantly, what it looks like for kids to return in the fall. We're not entirely sure. It's going to depend on the data, what we're seeing. We are trying to develop a trigger language, and so while we don't know what the data will look like, what does it have to look like in order to have this many kiddos in a classroom, but it looks a lot different than it has been in the past, possibly closed cafeterias with the kiddos having their lunch in the classroom, more stable groups where kids don't rotate through classes, but maybe an instructor rotates through their groups, and all kids stay together. And so our schools are really looking into every aspect of the school day, and it's so complex. But we're having those conversations in partnership and, just keep checking back. I will quickly mention that the Department of Education has draft guidance for schools up on their website. And if you have a tough time finding it, please reach out to our Business Reopening Task Force. And I'll just quickly say that email address again. It's covidbusinessrecovery@tchd.org. And we can provide more information and a link to that guidance. But it is complex and we're unsure. But really actively working in that space, it's so important for us as well.
Great, thank you. And David, we also want to take this opportunity to let everyone know Arapahoe County and Tri-County Health Department tomorrow night will offer another COVID-19 telephone town hall. You can access it all the same ways that you are getting to this call. Tomorrow night, we're going to focus on kids and COVID, and we will actually have the Department of Education on with us, as well as the superintendents from both Littleton and Cherry Creek schools, to give us kind of an overview of what they are considering and to talk through some of the guidance that we're going to be getting. We do have just a few more quick questions coming in. Another Facebook question: will childcare inside gyms be allowed if under 10 kiddos?
You know, I'm not sure, and I'm jotting that one down because it's not something that we flagged before. I will say this has come up for places of worship, childcare during church, and the recommendation has been no. Keep your children with you, sit as a family, maybe provide an alternate service that kids are welcome to, but that the childcare within places of worship were not permitted. Again, just trying to reduce the number of points of contact. How many folks have you had contact with? And if your kiddo has contact with 10 other kids in the daycare at the gym, then you've had contact with all of those folks too. And so it's a little complex, but I'm not sure if when gyms resume fuller capacity, if childcare will be allowed. But again, at that 10-person limit, I wouldn't anticipate it very soon.
Great, thank you. And we've got one last question, hoping to end on a little bit of an upbeat note, but this is not so upbeat. The question is, could a business be liable if they are found to be a hot spot or source of infection?
There are businesses do have responsibilities, including the legal responsibilities under the order to maintain a safe and sanitary workplace. I am not the right person to explain legal liabilities for an individual business, but there is a duty there. It is a legal requirement to not have 10 people in a room, provide that protective equipment to your employees, ensure your customers are maintaining social distancing. And so that is a duty that you have as an employer, but you should consult an attorney about any liability that you may incur as a result.
Great, thank you. And we want to give a super thank you to Melissa Sager from Tri-County Health Department for sharing all of her expertise. You have been so invaluable to all of our businesses that have been calling in with these questions. That's the end of this week's roundtable discussion. Please join us next Friday, June 12th, from 9 to 10 a.m. for our next discussion, and we'd love to take more of your questions at that time. In the meantime, if you'd like a follow-up from Arapahoe Douglas Works, you can sign up on the website, and that's www.adworks.org/businesses. Look for the Arapahoe CARES Business Roundtable, and you can find a form to submit your information there. We thank you for joining us and hope everyone stays well.